What up, little honeydews, and welcome back to Sippin' and Bitchin', episode 9.8, where the drinks are icy and the book talk is spicy. It's spooky season. My brain's officially muddled. We're your main bitches. I'm Sam.
Hello, and I'm Steph. Please note, I could have just cut your little and put it. It's fine. Maybe I'll still do that.
I
Just
know
for the
part of me's
just
like,
for
is she
the
gonna
lulz.
cut it or just keep it?
We'll see. For the lulz. Technically, spooky season starts in like August if you're a theme park person like I am, but everyone does their stuff in August. So I've already been in the spooky mindset. I do need to get the rest of my decorations down from the attic, though. Maybe
I
that'll
need to
be
get
this
my
weekend.
decorations out, yeah.
Because also we're going into my favorite season, which is fall. Yay.
Our favorite season.
Yeah, well, winter's a very close second for me, but like fall,
Fall's
leaves
the
and
best.
things. All right, part 8. So we're going to do chapters 32 to 35 today. Of course, we're going to start with the note to the reader, which we always start with in every episode. So please mentally prepare yourself for that. I also need chapstick, but that's neither here nor there.
Mood.
This book contains themes and or discussions that some readers may find difficult to read. While there are no graphic scenes, there is mention of sexual assault, suicide, the death of children, and discussions of verbal, psychological, and physical abuse. If you need to talk with somebody about your experiences, there are people waiting to help, and then I will put the resources in the description down below of this video and of this episode if you're listening to just the audio format. I'm unsure if they're clickable in the audio format, but I think they are. So hopefully that is a thing for you to use.
If not, hopefully they're copy and pastable.
Yes, I think they are. Well, let us know if you use them. Or if you try to click them. Or if you accidentally click them like I do when I do things.
Yes.
You know. But chapter 32. We're like halfway through the book.
We're getting there, guys. We finally hit a groove in our schedules that we can record multiple times, so hopefully we can get through it. We're hoping to be done by Thanksgiving. Fingers crossed. Because it's a big dream. Okay, chapter 32. So here we are once again with Miss Sick Sarah. She is trying not to vomit all over Ash's desk. And she's saying it had to be the bacon. Why? I had no idea. I love this stuff and was in a long-term relationship with it. But the moment I smelled the fried meat, I thought I might vomit all over the table. And really, to me, that's the biggest sign. Because when I was pregnant with both my kids, I could not eat bacon for the life of me. So
it's honestly tragic.
It really was.
Yeah. Well.
It really, really was.
Fun fact about Steph is her nickname used to be Bacon and Bacon Bits in high school.
So we
That's
love
your
bacon
fun
around
tidbit
here.
of the day.
She even has a bacon pillow. Like, that's how serious it was.
Yeah, it used to sing, but I don't have batteries in it.
Shame. And so she's trying to get herself together, and then someone says her name, and she looks up, and she says she sees Belle and Eos coming down the main hall together. We love them. And she says no two people could look more different than they did. Belle was dressed in black from head to toe, her dark hair swept back from her face. Eos wore a bright yellow tunic and white pants, and her cherry red hair flowed to the middle of her back. We love our little grumpy sunshine duo. They're trying to figure out why she's just staring at the floor, and then that's when she realizes she's just staring at the floor. And this is a interaction that can be best described as Belle has no filter, and Eos wants to shove a filter in her mouth.
Honestly, tracks.
Because Sarah's not looking too hot. Belle's telling her she's not looking too hot, and Eos is trying to tell her she needs to be more sensitive about how she says it, and more gentle and caring. Because she asked Eos does she look bad, and she shook her head, and Belle said she's lying only because she's nice. So there's some bickering back and forth about her needing to be nicer. And Sarah's saying, I think something didn't agree with me. I was feeling a little nauseous, and she got cut off by Belle saying, no and we assume she's going to say no shit, but then she sees Eos, and she goes, no shush, no shush it. You look so energetic.
Unbelievable.
And she's like, you look so rested and lively. And she's just smiling at her. She says, please stop smiling at me like that. And Eos is trying to actually figure out what's going on with her. And she says, I've never known a primal to get sick from food. But then again, you just ascended. And they talk about how Belle felt sick to her stomach a few times afterwards.
The signs are
And
signing.
the signs are signing. And Belle said, but I never looked like I was half dead. And Eos says, sweet fates. um, and Sarah looks at Eos and says, you truly are the most gracious goddess there is. And Belle says, are you flirting with Eos right in front of me? And Sarah says, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing while married to a primal of death. I love the sarcasm in this section. Just between her and Belle, it's some of my favorite interactions. And she says, no, I'm just pointing out how gracious she is for putting up with you. And she says, you wound me, Mia. And she tells her to shut up. And she says, yes, your majesty. Eos claims she's not always so antagonizing, but I don't believe it. And she says, you don't have to lie for me, Sovit. And that kind of like puts Sarah on edge for a second because it's close to soulless, which is my soul. But what she was calling Eos was my life. And I think that's so sweet. And she's like, you're adorable, Belle. And Belle flips her off and says, is this adorable? And she says, it makes me want to flirt with you now. And while Belle's laughing, Eos is kind of looking at her, kind of like, something's not right. I had thought, when I originally read through this, that this was Eos knowing, because she's like life from fertility and stuff. I thought that she knew that she was pregnant in this moment, but didn't want to say anything yet. But I was wrong.
Shocker.
Yeah, it made me sad. Then they ask if they're heading to talk to Addis. I was in the office when Ash told him about Vessa showing up. He was pissed. I hope he fucking destroys her. That make me a bad person? Eos and Sarah at the same time say yes, even though they're kind of hoping the same thing. Belle is saying, I expected that response from her, but you used to be more fun, talking to Sarah. And she says, you don't know me. How would you know? And she says, oh, I know you. My absurdity recognizes your absurdity. Or it used to, she said. Wait a sec. And then she's like staring at her, like squinting at her, like she's like using x-ray vision or something. She says, wait a second, your absurdity is still in there. It's just leashed. And she's like, I don't know if I should feel complimented or insulted, or just really confused. And Eos explains that Belle can sense her temperament. It comes from the court lineage, the whole hunt and divine justice thing. Sensing one's temperament allows you to be a better hunter and deliver divine justice. Sensing someone's temperament helps to know if someone's act was a one-off or something in their nature. And Sarah says that makes sense. So my absurdity, what exactly does that mean? And what does it tell you? And she says it means you're someone who would shadow step to a whole ass different court without ever shadow stepping anywhere by yourself before, referencing when she did just that. And she's like, I knew I would be fine. And Belle says, anyway, you're impulsive. You're easily distracted, hot-tempered, violent if provoked, and sometimes even when you're not all that provoked. And Sarah says, I feel attacked. But Belle keeps going on, saying, you're wild and reckless in a way that borders on having a death wish. You have a vengeful nature. And she's trying to tell her you can stop now, and Eos is saying, good luck with that. She's in the zone. And she's like staring, unblinking now. And she says, "You don't think enough, yet you're an overthinker. You can switch from joy to rage in a snap. The only thing predictable about you is that you're unpredictable."
Wow.
But
Sounds like me.
right? It does sound like you. "But you're also loyal and dedicated, caring. You have a strong sense of what is wrong and what is right, even if you operate in the middle. Your nature is in juxtaposition with itself, a certain brand of absurdity just like mine, poor people skills included. But as I've said before, you've got a lot of that leashed right now." And Sarah doesn't know what to say. I wouldn't know what to say either. If someone just like word vomited everything about my temperament and stuff, I would have been like, "Okay, cool, thanks. Good talking to you." And then she's like, "Wait, why am I even here talking to you about this?" And Belle says, "I was wondering the same thing." Um, and she is starting to walk away, and Belle shouts out, "You're welcome, by the way. You don't look half dead anymore." And Sarah flips her off and walks past the empty pedestal, thinking, "I really need to put something on that thing." So there we go again with the damn pedestal. I'm gonna send Jennifer an email just all about that pedestal.
I'm sure it'll put something about our kids on there.
Yeah. Maybe Poppy will go to the Shadowlands, to that place, and then it'll reference her walking by a pedestal, but it won't be empty. It'll have something on it. Who knows? That's my
Couldn't
hope.
tell you.
No, but you could guess. So she's walking by the empty pedestal that we're all annoyed by. She is feeling a bit better. She The doors to Ash's office are open, and like always, immediately connect with his. He's chilling in his newly decorated office. There are two dove gray chairs that have been placed across from the settee, and Sion is in there with him. There's another end table. This one around had been positioned between the chairs, and they weren't the only new additions. A table had been brought in and put behind the settee where Rain sat. Two pitchers and several glasses were on the narrow stand. Look at them making his office look all lively and homey. We love that. She mouths thank you to Rain as she walks through the pillared alcove, and he gave her a quick nod in return. And Ash motions to her with a curled finger. It's like, I would love for someone like Ash to be like, "Come here, come here."
You made it sound like she's a pet, and that was very uncomfortable.
Okay, maybe not in a pet way. Like, okay. There's a slender black box almost the length of her forearm on the credenza. What's in the box, Ash? And he tugged her down to sit in his lap, and it gave her a moment of unease, a little PTSD kicking in. And he asks her if she's feeling well, and she nods. And then they ask Addie's what the news is, and he says he still has eyes in Deos, and he knows that Colas hasn't been seen at court as much as usual. His spy,
Demetria?
Demetria? Yeah. For some reason, my brain wanted to go Dame version of pronouncing it, and not duh. And I was like, blah, 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 blah. My
Well,
tongue didn't
Jennifer,
like it.
you really never know.
That's true. It could be Samantha for all I know. Who knows? Um, uh, she's the one who realized he was there, and he was like, "How'd you know?" And then Vedentia, that fun stuff of just randomly knowing stuff. I feel like that is what it's like when you're sitting there and suddenly remember something, or suddenly a light bulb moment comes. That's the Vedentia. You're just like, "Hey, wait a minute."
Exactly.
It's great. It's a great time. And she says, "I met her briefly and thought she acted different than the other gods who visited Colas. She didn't." act like an asshole. And she wants to know if she's safe there. And he says, for now, word is her favorite golden fuck has been running interference for him along with Varys. And Ash says, Varys of Kithria. My father entombed him, and he said, I know, I aided him in doing so along with my brother. I believe he must have escaped when Vestas had her Draken attack the Redwoods. Rahar cursed and said, we checked and double checked to make sure we got all those who were entombed. And he said he must have summoned. We must have assumed he was one of the ones killed without much left behind. I'm sorry. And Ash says it's okay. It would be impossible to know for sure that all who escaped were recaptured. The blame for this does not lay at the feet of anyone in this room. It was Vessa's fault. But they don't go into who this guy is.
Mm-hmm.
Or what that means, or who is he? Why was he entombed? What did he do?
They also, by the end of this book, don't mention him again. I'm like 95% positive that they don't mention him again. So
I don't like that at all.
yeah, well, entombed him for what is the question? What does he do? What are the powers that lie in the hands of Varys of Kithria?
I know. That made everyone tense up like that.
Mm-hmm.
Addis goes on to say, while Callum and Varys have been speaking for Colas, one particular visitor has spent a lot of time with him, and what I can only assume is an attempt to assure he has their support, and that is Thanos. And Sarah says, first off, it pisses me off that he is having meetings, and secondly, there is no way Thanos will give him support, and they're saying, don't be too sure about that. And she's shocked to hear that because of what Colas did to Thanos' court with the Siren. And they said Thanos doesn't like to make waves. And then Sion says, look, Thanos doesn't particularly like Colas. I don't think any of the primals do. And they said, except his brother, and points to Addis. And Addis says, clearly I was the twin brother with intelligence and good looks, but without any humor, because this all makes him sad, and it makes us sad for him. Thanos can be very self-involved, and Sarah says, name a primal who isn't self-involved besides Nyktos. And Addis is very offended by this, jokingly. And Addis says, I am self-involved, and I am just as selfish, and you know that. And she wanted to deny it, but she wouldn't be sitting here if he wasn't selfish. And Sion says, don't forget that at the end of the day, this is the same primal who drowned a city, simply because those living there ceased to honor him by endangering their lives. And Sarah says, I haven't forgotten that. He was upset over the loss of those Siren. Why would he not want justice for that? Or at the very least want to avoid being put in a bad situation again? And Rahar says, because seeking that justice could negatively affect him. And Sarah says, I'm not seeking it will still negatively affect him. It's not like we're going anywhere, no matter what side he chooses. If Colas doesn't take the offered deal, there's still two sides. And so they're trying to figure out, whose side is Thanos going to be on in the end. He's scared of Colas, but he's also scared of Sarah. And they say, what we need to keep in mind is that Thanos may side with Colas now, but you will have a chance to convince him otherwise. Both of you will once the irony ends. And they're just hoping that they can, because he has the second largest army, and they need him on their side to stand a chance. So they're still in Ash's office. Addis had left because he had heard Layla's voice and wandered off.
Mm-hmm.
And she's getting ready to go to the human lands, and she's feeling nervous, excitement, and anxiety. The things that we're always feeling. And Ash is trying to ask her what's going on, and she's doing that whole nothing. And he says, are you sure about that? And she nods, and he says, I feel like we're about to have a repeat of last night. And she said, what part of last night? And he said, both. And so there's the talking and then the fucking, you know. He wants to do both. It's a fun time. Ash, let's see. She's trying to do her ether lessons, and then Ash says, "Shit, I forgot." And she said, "Forgot what?" And he says, "Can't believe I forgot this. It's for you." And it's that box that was on his desk when she first entered. And he tells her to open it, and she does. And it says, "The hilt was crafted." It's a dagger, and it says, "The hilt was crafted from the same kind of lightweight white material, but that is where the similarities ended to her other one. The pommel had been carved into a full moon and etched into the grip were the silver flames. Carved into the crossguard was the same swerving vine pattern as seen in the throne room. The blade was slender and dull white, sharpened into a fine deadly point, and chiseled into the bone with meticulous attention to detail. In each stroke of fur and curve of ear was a wolf, its jaws open, bearing teeth and breathing fire. Homegirl got a new dagger. And it looks like this. If you're on YouTube, I'm holding up my replica of it. It's a pretty sweet dagger. So it's made out of ancient bone. So it's got a nice white dagger. It's got a wolf breathing fire on it. It's pretty badass looking, not gonna lie. And Addis cleaved it from his bone spear, and yes, he agreed to do it without me having to punch him. And he made it for her, carving and all. And he said, "I thought this one would be more personalized. This one would be more personalized and symbolic. You're the hand that wields the blade." And she repeated the part of the prophecy that said, "A silver beast with blood seeping from the jaws of fire, bathed in the flame of the brightest moon." He finished. And she's like, "It's beautiful. I don't remember if I told you this or not, but I was never given gifts before, not during the rites or for my birthday. It didn't bother me before. At least that's what I told myself. It seems silly to feel bad about not getting gifts when so many people went to bed with empty bellies and no roofs over their heads, but I did care. Not because I wanted things, I just wanted to be thought of, basically." And she tells him that the Shadowstone dagger that he gave her was her first gift, and it will always be special to her, just as this one will be. And she thanks him, and he says, "Have I told you how much I loathe your mother?" And she says, "Not today." And they're wondering if they'll see her later, and if she'll look for her, and Sarah's not really sure. And then she says, "I promise I won't throw this dagger at you." And he says, "I don't know if I should be pleased or disappointed." But she puts it in her sheath and asking him if he needs to feed, and he says no. And she has that messy mix of relief and disappointment, and asks if he's sure. And she puts her hands on his cheeks and says, "Is it my imagination again, or does your skin not feel as cold?" And he says, "It's not your imagination, it's just my blood regenerating." And she says, "That's faster than normal." And he says, "I think it's because of you rising as the true primal of life. The essence is already strengthening in me." And she thinks, which means it's already strengthening in the other primals, including Colas. But she doesn't have much time to think about that because soon Nectis is there. And so is Rain. Rain's not excited about where she's going. But she assures him it won't be long. It's just her and Nectis going. And she says, "I promise I won't get into any fights or even tell anyone who I am." And he says, "Any mortal who crosses your path will know." And she says, "Oh, because they'll sense it." And he says, "That and your eyes." And she says, "Oh, yeah." So she keeps forgetting about her eyes. But honestly, if you don't look at yourself in a mirror a lot, I would forget about my eyes looking like that too. Um, and he's telling her that she can shadow step. She doesn't need the gateways anymore since she's now a primal.
She's a baddie.
She is a baddie. And Nectis is like, wait, this will only be your second time shadow stepping? And she's like, maybe. Ash is like, it's easy. And Nectis says, more like it's going to be interesting.
Accurate.
And he's full of helpfulness. And Ash is reassuring her, saying, you know what to do. All you have to do is focus. And Rain says, good luck with that. And she's like, you know what? Your presence here isn't really needed. And Ash is trying to get her focus back, telling her not to overthink it, even though we all know she will. Same thing with coming back. And she says, why did Nectis say this should be interesting if it's so easy? We're basically just moving super fast. And he says, because he was being an ass. And Nectis says, true. I freaking love him. But anyways, they reassure her, whatever, say their goodbyes, and then her and Nectis shadow step into the garden. She pictured the silvery green bushes with the purplish blue spikes and stone bench before them. The flowers her father had favored. Holding onto that image, she summoned the ether. It rose in a hot rush and spread through her entire body. She took a swallow breath and willed us to Wafer Palace Gardens.
Yes, she did.
Yes, she did. And then chapter 33. They are there, and they can already tell that the effects of the rot has lifted because they can feel a cool breeze. It's not like hot and sticky like it used to be. It's like an actual cool breeze. And she says it never felt this cool, at least not that I remember. The rot affected the weather. She said, I knew the rot was gone, but feeling it is different. But eventually Nectis says we should go find your sister. And he tells her to lead the way. And then she realizes that she recognizes his scent, which she says it's earthy. She never noticed it before, but she sensed it before he's even near her. As she says, it's not really a smell or a taste, more like a sensation. And he's like, is there a question for me? She's like, I'm not sure. I can tell when it's you, and I think I'm starting to know the other Draken before even seeing them too. Ash said it's like picking up on an echo. And Nectis says what he and the other primals feels is an ecto, but what you're sensing is our imprint. There's a difference. Only the true primal of life and the true primal of death can pick up on our imprints and use them to communicate with us. And then when you're the true primal of life and death, well.
Then you just get overwhelmed in your senses.
Yeah, right?
Oh, then you get the Wolven, and you get the Draken, and you get the Scully dudes, and then you get the Revenants, and
Man, you just OP
then
and get everything.
you also create your own civilization of wolf dragons.
We're gonna have, I can see it now. They have wings like a dragon, but they're a wolf body that breathes fire.
Yep.
Oh
You
my
heard it here
God.
first. That is canon.
So, are we having she just thinks it and they exist, or are we having a donkey and dragon situation? Like,
No. Hear me out.
Delano, no, Kieran and Reaver are gonna procreate.
No. Oh. No, but Jadis could procreate with. Anyway, we'll have that conversation another time. That's not important right now.
I don't know. This feels very important suddenly. Someone draw it. Anyways. Oh gosh. Anyway, so she says, you mean I can talk in your head? And Dectus says, part of me wants to tell you no. And she says that's rude. He says, but yes, if we open ourselves up to it. And then he stops himself and says, let's talk about this more when we're not standing in the mortal realm. And she was like, good gods, I'd actually forgotten what I was doing here. She says, come on, I'm thinking we'll be able to find Ezra in the dining hall. There are guards ahead. And he says, I'm not sure if any of them would recognize me. And he says, I find that hard to believe. With your hair and freckles, you have quite recognizable features. And then she explains to him that she wasn't seen a lot. Usually the servant stairs or the halls are what she used. and half the guards here probably thought she was a servant, so it's quite possible none of them would recognize her, and I doubt they would just let me enter the dining hall. Most of the guards don't even know my name, and Nectus is not happy with it, and she just says it is the way it is, and he says more like unacceptable. And she says that too, but because of the deal, I guess it was easier to keep my identity hidden, so no one had to explain why I wasn't available to marry or wonder what happened when I eventually disappeared. And Nectus is like, as if that was the only option. We love these men. Love these men.
It's like considered a, it's fine. Let's not get into the logistics of that
Are
conversation.
you gonna say, is he considered a man?
Yeah, he's a
I
dragon, so like
I
technically
guess
he has a
technically
male
no. He's a
form.
male. He's a male. These males, man. How about that? These males.
Accept. I'm gonna try to
Okay.
not spiral and overthink that.
Okay. It's funny that you said I'm going to try and not spiral and overthink, and I look up to seeing Nectus laughed. Sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
He's responding to you.
Always.
Um, and she's thinking about how she might have to use compulsion, and he says, I think you underestimate your presence if you think you won't have the same impact as Ash. You're the true primal of life, Sarah. What would the guards do if you showed them that? And she said, freak out. And he said that and allow you to go wherever you want. Um, anyways, because he knows that she doesn't like the idea of compelling someone. He says, if you like, I can scare them as Ash did. And she says, I don't know if we should do that. And then she's like, I guess I could just compel them not to see us. And he says, I suppose. I love that he's there to kind of be like, you do what you want, but I think that's a bad idea.
I don't think he has any room to talk because in situations where he should stop a fight or something, he's just like, he had it coming. It's fine.
He had it coming. Anyways, there's a third option, he says. Allow them to see you. As Ash said, they will know you are at least a god and would likely allow you to dance on their backs if that is what you wished. And she says, I keep forgetting that. And he says, it's understandable. And so they start moving again. And as they get closer, she hears the guards talking. And I like that. I'll tell you what. That one is an odd snob. Shit. And part of me wishes they lingered for a second longer. I want to know what where this conversation was going.
They were getting the tea. They were spilling the tea.
They were spilling the tea. They were probably talking about her mother.
True.
But they see them and they say, "Stop right there." And she says, "The fact that I made it to the steps without either of you noticing is kind of concerning, don't you think?" And he said, "Listen here, miss. I don't know where you came from, but dear gods, you're enormous." He says, looking at Nectus, and Nectus says, "Thank you." Enormous or not, and he stops again and says, "Where's the rest of your clothing, my man?" And Nectus says, "Mortals, always so preoccupied by the flesh that they don't see what is right in front of them." And he says, "Mortals? I think my man has been in his cups tonight." Um, and then they see her eyes, and they realize that she's not mortal. And the other guy doesn't see. He's like, "What's your problem? Maybe you're deep in your cup." And he says, "Shut up, you prick," and starts bowing. He says, "Don't call me a prick, you fuck." And he says, look at her eyes, you fool." And he turns and looks at her eyes, and he goes, "Oh shit." Um, and Nectus says, "The security here is impressive." She's saying the bowing's not necessary. Um, let's see. With And Nectus is concerned by how they're acting scared, and she's like, how did they behave before? And he says, with joy upon seeing a god, not nearly sick with fear.
Tragic, really.
It really is. And she explains that crossing paths with gods usually doesn't end well. It shouldn't be this way. And Nectus says, no, it shouldn't. Um, and then she's like, anyways, you may rise, both of you. And oh, one of them was hurt and she didn't know it, and she accidentally healed him just by touching him. He was sick though. He wasn't like injured. He was like sick
Internally.
inside the body, like probably
Yeah.
a cancer or something like that.
It was
Um,
unclear and it didn't really like specify the illness,
yeah.
but it was serious enough where he could tell like
She could tell he was
I
dying slowly and painfully.
yeah. So it was one of those
Yeah.
things where like you don't know what it was, but like it wasn't an outwardly you could see symptomatic and like
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Like there's blood gushing. Yeah, no. She said, I never healed anyone from a sickness before, but I was the true primal of life now. Emphasis on life. Um, and he says, thank you. I prayed each night in the temple, but there was no relief. I stopped praying, thinking, maybe I wasn't worthy, that I'd done something to deserve it. Oh, this man's feelings. And she says, you
Honestly.
haven't. And he says, thank you again. And she's like, don't mention it. And she looks, Nectus is looking at her blandly. She goes, whoops. He says, whoops, indeed, very dryly. And, oh, that's funny. Nexus is basically thinking, I can't take her anywhere without her doing something. But she says, I need
Accurate.
to speak to the queen. And they tell her she's in the dining hall. And she looks at him and says, make your life a worthy one. And he says, of course I will. I swear to you. Yeah, until he dies. And then she explains to Nectus she didn't mean to do that. Um, and there was no answer, and she turned, and Nectus had stopped. He stood in front of one of the banners, saying that the crest is an odd symbol, and she says it's supposed to represent strength and leadership, except it looks like someone getting stabbed through the head. And he says that's not what that means, not originally. The leaves, those are not laurel, they're elm. Uh, and he says, do you know the significance of trees to the ancients? And she says, life. And he says, yes. And the sword, it symbolizes many things: power, strength, courage, truth. Um, and she says, true life? True primal of life? No, that has to be a coincidence and stretch. And he says, I do not believe in coincidences, nor do I believe that all this that the that is all this insignia represents. Look at the position of the sword. It's slanted, not entirely straight. I mean, who is? That should be familiar to you. Um,
Rule number 39. There is no such thing as a coincidence. Sorry, I was
yeah,
pulling some Gibbs out in here.
it's okay. We love Gibbs. Are you like having a stroke over there? Or are you dancing?
I'm dancing to the
Okay.
beat of Nectus's heart.
Okay. And she says it makes her think of dying, and she says death. That's a symbol for death. And he says, no, that is a symbol for representing both life and death on the crest, on the same bloodline that eventually birthed a mortal who became the true primal of life, who happens to be the mate of a primal of death. Oh my gosh, why did it just take now for me to be like, it represents life and death, and it's Poppy's bloodline? Oh my gosh, don't look at me like that. Don't look at me like
I
that.
won't tell you I had the same realization while I was doing the notes. I was like,
Oh, good.
wait. But then if you the next like couple lines you're like, wait, this fucker orchestrated this whole thing. And then you're like, wait, Ethos really had to have had a plan. Anyway, you can continue and then we can have this epiphany together.
I'm going to read it one more time. That is a symbol representing both life and death on the crest of the same bloodline that eventually birthed a mortal who became the true primal of life, who also happens to be the mate of the true primal of death, who will have a son, who will give birth, who's will end up having a daughter, who is the true primal of life and death. Oh my goodness. Anyways, okay. That damn prophecy indeed. She said, while the fates couldn't see the entirety of the future, they could see as many possibilities that lay in wait. The Muriel crest is only a few hundred years old. It started with motherfucker. And he
Mm-hmm.
said, that's who it started with? And she said, it started with Roderick Muriel. He only became the recognized king of Lysania after the deal. None of this means Ethos gave Roderick the design, but he must have. And Nectus says this is not the symbol that represents the inventability of life and death and the importance of both. Inevitability. Gosh, I could
I
not say
was
that
like,
word.
what word was that? What word are you saying?
I was staring at it and I'm like, my brain knows the word, but my mouth had no clue what it was. Inevitability of life and death and the importance of both. The crescent moon, a maiden as the fates promised. And you shall leave this realm touched by life and death. That was something my old nursemaid Odetta said to me. I have a birthmark that's kind of shaped like a crescent moon. And he says, fates marked you at birth with the symbol of equal power of life and death.
You know, what is with ancestry skipping like a generation? Like, it's not your immediate like mom and dad that give you XYZ thing. No, it's like your grandparents that give you XYZ thing, and then you inherit it from your great whatever. Why
I
can't
mean,
y'all
in
just
this
be a
one,
little
it's
bit
because they
more
had to wait
clear line?
for a female line, and she gave birth to boys, so it had to skip.
But did it have to skip, Jennifer? Did it have to skip? I mean, for the purpose of the lore, yes, it did have to
Yes.
skip. But I'm just saying, like, it always has to skip. Just
Can you
saying.
imagine how different this book would be if she found out she was pregnant with a girl and they
Could you
knew
imagine
what
if
that would
it was
mean?
Isbitch?
I'm so glad it's not, but
Just saying.
anyways. But if ethos left some sort of hint behind, it was the symbol of life. This insignia could represent something other than you and Ash. It could be life and death not joined, but one and the same. A silver beast with blood seeping from the jaws of fire, bathed in the flames of the brightest moon to ever be birthed, will become one. And she says a chill went through her as she stared at the crest. If this symbol represented life and death as one, never existed before, how could ethos have had anything to do with it, and why?
Because he knew. Because he knew. I'm telling you, Ethos ain't a dumb man.
So chill went through her. Yeah.
But yeah, no, Ethos had to know. Ethos had to know everything at that point because there's no way he makes this deal. This man makes this crest situation banner thing, literally sets up everything. There's just no way he doesn't know. But what I would
How does
love,
he know?
which I don't think we're going to get this, but I wonder if Ethos somehow, I mean, the realistic possibility is some sort of fate or somebody gives them the tea. Don't think that'll happen though. But what happens if like she summons Ethos? Because she can summon some people, you know what I'm saying? What if she's so powerful she summons Ethos to be like, bro, what the fuck did you want me to do here?
Yeah. Maybe I would say maybe Ward could tell her, but if Victor's not telling them, why would he tell her? I don't know. There's gonna be someone somewhere that pops out of the woodwork that we haven't met yet. That's like, surprise! I've been here this whole time, but I just didn't want to say anything till the time was right because fate to do that.
Yeah.
But anyway, she has that realization, and the Venetia's quiet, which meant it either involved the fates or something close to her, like her present or future. And then she thinks about the line that says, for finally, the primal rises, the giver of blood and the bringer of bone, the primal of blood and ash. And, another chill goes through her, which goes through me every time I read that. And she says, none of this makes sense or even matters right now. And you know why it doesn't matter? And he says, why? She says, because trying to figure all of it out makes my head feel like it's going to explode. Like go splat all over those banners. Mood, honestly. It's how Jennifer makes us all feel trying to like theorize and figure it all out too. He says, well, we don't want
Correct.
that to happen. Um and he's pointing out that the idea of all this being connected to her angers her, and she says it annoys me because it makes me feel like things are predestined. I guess that's sometimes not bad if you like the outcome, but other times it is bad. Either way, it makes you wonder what the point of it is, what the point is if what's to come will happen one way or another. And I get that. That would be annoying to be like, is what I'm doing even going to change the possible outcomes, or is it just going to happen whether I participate or not? And he says nothing's written in the stones, and she's like, yeah, everyone keeps saying that, but it sure as fuck doesn't feel. And then she gets a prickly sensation erupting all over her. The cause wasn't because nobody was guarding the door. That wasn't all that surprising. Ezra wouldn't demand guards stand outside each and every chamber she occupied, and she got that. She was think I was of like mind, but she was mortal, and Lysania was not without enemies, especially the Vadina Isle lords, thanks to me following through with my mother's orders, but it wasn't that. And she said, Ash put wards up when he first brought me to the Shadowlands. One's meant to keep my family safe. They would still be working, right? And Nikto says they may have weakened a little while Ash was in stasis, but they'll remain as long as he lives. And she's like, she nodded but picked up her pace because those wards protected her family against gods who sought to harm them. Not anything that wasn't a god, not primals. And she says essence throbbed hotly in her chest as she breathed deeply. There was a smell in the air, one that shouldn't be here. It was still lilacs. And she broke into a run.
Gross.
She willed the doors open. They swung apart, slamming into the stone walls on either side, causing those in the long rectangular chamber situated in the center of the sunken space to gasp. A chair fell over as my gaze swept past the familiar faces. All I saw was gold. Gold hair, gold tunic, gold painted wings, eyes a shade of blue so pale they would have bordered on lifeless if not for the spark of ether behind the pupil as they locked with mine. Callum sat at the dinner table with my family and smiled.
We hate him.
Do we hate him still? I don't know how we're supposed to feel about him at this point. We hate him.
No idea.
He says, Seraphina, what a lovely surprise to see you. And Ezra's like, wait, you guys know each other? I thought you only saw one another in passing. And Callum says, oh, we are well acquainted. And the bastard actually winked. And she's getting mad. She shadow steps from the top of the round steps to the side of the table. Lady Faber let out a little shriek of surprise and bounced against the table. Wine glasses toppling, splashing red liquid all over the white cloth. Callum started to rise, but she was faster. She said, gripping the back of his chair, I ripped it out from under him and threw it across the chamber. It smashed into the wall, shattering into pieces as he hit the floor on his ass. Seraphina, my mother's, found her voice then, clutching the ruby at her pearl. What are? And then she sees her eyes and said, my gods. And Callum says, well, not quite. And she tells him to shut up. And she flings the fucker the same direction as the chair. He hit the wall with a satisfying thud and fell forward. And he says, ouch. And then she slams her hand into his chest, shoving him into the wall, cracking the stone. Plumes of dust rose and shuddered to the floor as his head bounced off the stone. Sarah, Ezra spoke. Can you please tell me what is going on? Preferably starting with why you just tossed a god across the chamber? And she says, he is not a god.
He's not a god, bitch.
And she's like, okay, can you tell me what is happening? And at some point explain why your skin is... Actually, I don't even know what your skin is doing, but you look like a god. Were you ascended? And she said, I'll explain everything in a second, but I need you to get back. And she tells Nectus to protect them. He says, you're my priority. And she says, Nectus. And he sighs and says, as you wish. Makes me think of Princess Bride. As you wish. And Marisol catches on to the Mie Liesa. And then she asks Callum, what are you doing here? And he says, you asked me to be quiet. Well, you demanded that I do so. And kind of rudely, too. And she says, don't try to be clever, because you're not. He says, maybe not, but I am smarter than you. And he says, I was just chatting with some old friends, catching up. And she says, they're not your friends. And he's like, the former queen and I go way back. And she's like, what were you chatting about? And he said, you and what a lying whore her daughter is. And Nectus says, I'm really curious to see what kind of effect fire has on you, so you better watch your mouth, you little fuck. I love Nectus so much. And Nectus reminds her that he wouldn't have been able to shadow step into this realm. He was brought here. And then she says, who brought you here? Did he come with they asked if he came with another. They said no. And she says, he's been here a couple of days. And she says, you've been here that long? What the fuck, Callum? And he says, like how you looked behind gilded bars. And he said, that was it. Callum knew it too. His eyes flare wide and said shit. And she willed the essence basically to fuck him up. And Marisol says, I think I'm going to be sick, as Callum goes limp. And they ask if he's dead, and she says, unfortunately, no. And he'll be back to his obnoxious self sooner rather than later. And Nectus isn't impressed by seeing her mother. He says, you clearly don't know who your daughter is, but you're about to find out. She says, I started to frown, but then I felt it, the throb of awareness. I didn't just feel it in the center of my chest, but also in my bones and soul. And she says, uh-oh. And they said, what's happening now? And they're like, I'm not entirely sure. As the dishes begin to rattle, the thin fishes appear in the marble tile. A blast of thunder shook the chamber, exploding the glasses on the table. Oh no, Ezra threw her hands up. We just repaired the Great Hall from last time. It was horribly loud, the stones and hammers. And I swear they only banged those damn hammers when I got a few minutes to read. Oh, that's a mood. And Marisol said, really, Ezra? Is now a good time to mention that when another god is just about to appear? And Ezra says, God? That is not no god coming. It's a primal. I love how Ezra knows. She knows who's coming. And they're thinking, what have we done to anger the gods? And he says, it wasn't you, looking at Sarah's mother. And she just says, does he really need to do all this? And Nectus smiled and says, he does like to make an entrance. And it says, the air warped a few feet to my right, and a ball of crackling ether appeared. The orb expanded, thinning and stretching to roughly accommodate the height of a damn giant. Icy power drenched the dining hall as the tear in the realm spilt wide open. Thick mist rolled out, pooling on the floor as Ash arrived, dressed as he had when I'd left him in the Shadowlands, black breeches and loose linen shirt. He looked every inch a primal of death. He's so dramatic, and I love it.
He's always. I was gonna say, he's so fucking extra. So we go into chapter 34, and Ash shows up, and he's just like, what happened? And bro, just bro. And Sarah's like, was that really necessary? And he was like, I felt your anger, but decided to let it go. But then I felt your pain. And Sarah's like, I'm fine. And so Sarah's just pretty much annoyed that he's able to sense her emotions. And then he is like, why the fuck is Callum there? And Sarah's just annoyed that Ash showed up. And Nectus is saying that Ash showed up at a perfect time. And Nectus is about to explain to Sarah's mom who the fuck Sarah is now. And he says rise because they're all bowing and doing they're all being extra as hell. And
Probably praying that they
Ash,
don't die.
correct. And Ash, you know how Ash is. He doesn't really like the mom. And so Ash is going through this whole monologue about how brave and loyal Sarah is and how she cares deeply for others, even though they don't deserve it. And he's kind of pointing that at her mom, and the mom flinches. And Ash is just like, did they bow to you? Like, show you respect. So then he tells them to bow, and Sarah's like, she's like, this isn't fucking necessary, but he says the whole title. And
I
Marisol
love
freaks
that
out.
Nectus is going with him. Like, he went there with Sarah, but everything Ash is saying, Nectus is like, no, they didn't. You show them.
So extra as hell. So Marisol freaks out, and her mother couldn't move. Ezra smiled and says, it makes sense. Honestly, Ezra is very intuitive. And Ash is just to the mom, you don't bow. Do I need to repeat myself? And so she bows. And Ash is just like, it's only by the grace of my wife that you live. No one gives a shit. And then she apologizes for the table and the cracks in the wall. And Ezra's just like, we had just finished supper. I suppose the dining hall was in need of a remodel. And so Ezra's just like, so what's going on? Whatever. And Sarah's like, it's kind of a long story. And Ezra's like, can you not make some time? And she's like, there's not enough time in the realms for me to tell you everything, but I'll tell you as much as I can. And so she gives a very, 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 very Cliff Notes version of how she became the primal of life. And the mom was just like, I believed you died, which is valid, I guess. And then they talk about Colas and how he's the true primal of death and that he's still alive. But then she's like, I need to know what Callum was doing here. And they were just like, he arrived 2 days ago. We just returned from Mazine, where we celebrated the rite with Princess Kaylee and her family. I didn't speak very much with him. And I was just like, neither did I. He joined us for supper each night, but mostly kept to himself, which is why I think he is just a lonely boy. You know what I'm saying? Um, and um, Sarah looks at her mom and is like, he is the one who told you how a primal can be killed. And her mom was like, he arrived a few years after you were born and claimed he wanted to help us. He knew about the deal, so I believed him. Um, and then she was like, that is how a primal can be killed. Did you speak to him? And she said, a few times. He told me the rod had lifted because you succeeded. And Ezra was just like, you didn't tell me that. And the mom was just like, you already assumed she was dead, so like I wasn't gonna, dredge that up and make you hope for nothing. And Nectus is like, did he tell you she killed Nyktos? And the mom was like, no, but he said he could not tell me how. I thought, well, you know what I thought, which essentially is what everyone thought. And he talked about nothing of importance. He mostly seemed content with the company, even if it was quiet. But when he wasn't here, he spent his time at the Cliffs of Sorrow. I really don't understand this man.
He
And
needed to get away from Colus's toxic gas and needed some peace and quiet.
something like that.
He was
And then,
contemplating. I wonder, oh, maybe he was there secretly meeting with a fate or someone else that was in cohorts with him, and he's against Colus this whole time. I
that
don't know.
seems a little bit too. I
Yes,
don't
says
think
the
he
girl
would
who
have.
thought of Wolven Draken. So
That is more possible than Callum. I don't know if Callum has the power to summon a fate. You have to have a specific power to summon a fate. Anyway,
maybe he's
so
already in cahoots with one.
maybe he is one. Anyway,
Eh.
then Sarah tells them that Callum is the dead reanimated, which is stupid. And Ezra's like, well, what happens if he comes back here? And Sarah's just like, call my name no matter what. Like, if you need me, all you have to do is call my name and I will hear you. And Ezra's just like, that's all. Um, and Sarah's like, it's because we share blood. And then Ezra really, really intuitively was just like, if Callum serves Colas, then why would he tell anyone how to kill a primal? And Sarah's like, trust me, I have the same question and I plan to get the answer out of him. Which, honestly, I love that for her. And so Sarah just tells them to prepare for natural disasters. And Ezra and Marisol are asking if they're allowed to tell their kingdoms. And Nectus is like, and Sarah looks to Nectus, and Nectus is like, you're a queen, like, you do what you want. And then Nectus tells them that he is the first Draken. Not just a Draken, but the first Draken. And then I see a bunch of allusion to events that happen later on in the book, and I get sad, so I sigh. And then her mom, Sarah's about to leave, and her mom asks to speak privately with her, and they kind of have this whole heart to heart. It's like a half apology, half just acknowledgement of like, you didn't grow up with a mother, and when when the mom thought Sarah died, she felt anger toward herself and how shitty of a human being she was, which, better late than never, I guess, for feeling that kind of remorse. And toward the end, she is just like, essentially, she's just like, it is what it is. I'd like to move forward versus dwelling on the past. And after all of this shit is done and through, like, she'd love to kind of essentially repair the relationship with her mom. And, well, we know how that ends up.
It's
It's
such a
just tragic. It's such tragic, yes,
good
indeed.
job. The mother got to start the process, but she didn't
Honestly,
get to
it would have
finish
been
it.
worse, I think, if they didn't have this conversation. I think, like,
Oh
it's
yeah.
still hurtful, but, like, imagine the unsaid things and, like, not knowing. I think that that's kind of worse.
Still think she would have died thinking her mother never loved her
Correct.
at all.
Which is not quite the case. So then we move into chapter 35, and Nectus is just like, you're quiet, and Sarah's just thinking, and, Nectus is like, your sister is very inquisitive, And Sarah's like, how many questions did she manage to ask? And he's like, far more than any mortal should have been capable of doing in such a period of time. And I think that's so
Puppy?
funny.
Puppy?
Um, and then Sarah's like, I think on some level she knows like what's going on, like she senses something. Which, oh, I think Ezra is a big play here. I think Ezra's a big play. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me why. I think Ezra becomes a big, big,
You,
big
you know I'm going to
force.
ask you why. What are you thinking?
She has. I don't really know what the. I don't know what the criteria is, but like maybe she becomes like the charmed equivalent, like a white lighter. Like maybe the fate see her as some like important force, and they make her
Let me go
into a
back and
thing.
watch Charm now.
Yeah, well, it's
Um,
on Peacock or something, I think.
you know,
But I don't know,
uh,
something like that. Like obviously she dies and like it's tragic, sorry, spoiler. Um but maybe she gets reborn or maybe she gets reincarnated. I always forget the difference now, but like maybe I don't know. Just maybe she's Tawny. Oh, that'd be so fun. But it's not Tawny.
that'd be
That's not.
insane.
That'd be really meta of Jennifer if she wrote that in there like that. Um anyway,
Mm.
so then they're talking back and forth and then Sarah is going to shut us up back to that stupid empty pedestal in the foyer, which I don't know why she uses that as a waypoint now. It's a lot of mentions of this freaking pedestal. And Attis is at the House of Hades. And Sarah's just like, is he awake? Like, what's going on? So then they're paying Callum a visit. And Rain mentions that he needs to show Ash and Sarah something. I don't actually remember if that happens in this chapter. Anyway, not important. So then Ash is just like, how did things go? And they're having a cute little romantic moment, and Attis is being a smartass and is just like, don't mind us, take your time, we'll just stand here and wait. Um, and Ash is just like, I hope you're not too angry with me over my interference with your mother. And she's just like irritated, but she's not angry with him. And so then they have this whole conversation about Callum and how Attis knows how to kill a revenant, and Attis is just like fire of the gods, which is not Draken fire, it is Draken blood. Ingested Draken blood burns them up from the inside, which is kind of aggressive, but that's fine. And Attis is like, we would need to have it bottled. And as you well know, storing Draken blood isn't easy. So then they need basalt, which is another type of shadow stone. It's where dragon fire impacts the surface, and this temperature is at its highest, creating a medium to dark gray stone. Wild. Wild the chemistry. And then Ash says basalt, the undying hills. And there's a lot of rock rot that definitely could be basalt since the array erupted the mountain, likely unearthing it. And Attis is just like, I'll get on it once we're done here. Slay. And then they have this whole. The Irene, Attis was kind enough to explain that keeping Callum could be seen as a violation since he serves Colas, which we don't care about at this point, but it is what it is. And then they have this whole interaction with Callum, or they start to approach Callum, and Sarah wipes off all of his paint. And she's like, please tell me you don't see what I see and that I'm imagining things. And Ash is just like, he
Nope.
looks just like you. And other than the hair, he's the spinning image of Satoria. And it looks like that they could be cousins. And Sarah's just like, I've only seen paintings of my father, but his hair was a deep reddish brown, not the same as Nyctos's, more like red wine. And Attis is like, Satoria's hair was that color. This is a full circle moment that we're having here. And Ash is like, her soul was in your bloodline for thousands or for hundreds of years on the Muriel side. It's possible that influenced more than just your appearance. And Nectus is like, could be, or you are of the same bloodline as Satoria.
Your face.
Which means she is related indirectly, directly to this gold fucker. I'm just saying.
I mean, Poppy is related to the gold fucker, so
I love that. Um, so then they're interrogating Callum, and he's not very helpful. And it's just he essentially just says that he's from Carcedonia and he likes the company of Sarah's mom. And Sarah's just like, "Why did you tell my mom how to kill a primal?" And he's like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." Um, and like why would she give him the star with Satoria's body just so she could be essentially terrorized by corpse? And um essentially he needs to get his shit together and not lie to them. And then Attis is just like, or Attis takes him somewhere inconvenient, which is great. And Ash is just like, you can drop him off in the Lhasa Sea. And Attis is like, actually, that sounds like a good idea. Callum, I'm surprised he didn't say much, but also I'm confused where this is going because if their family, is this like a family betrayal? Is there like a bigger end game? Is he trying to be? I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know either. It's really confusing.
And I think that's the point Jennifer wanted to make. So
She did
then
good.
the Sarah wakes up in the middle of the night and she feels something wrong, something unnatural. And Ash is like, "Are you okay?" And Sarah's like, "Do you feel it?" And he's like, "Feel what?" And she's like, "You don't feel anything?" And he's like, "Shit." And she's like, "What is it?" And he says, "I feel it now." And she's like, "Is it Colas?" And he says, "No, it's the abyss," which is worse. And well, maybe not worse, but it's pretty bad actually. And so we have to deal with that on the next
Next
episode.
time.
Yeah,
Next time on Sippin' and Bitchin'.
this is oh my god, we should do like a whole
I
highlight.
was just
Times.
thinking.
Especially since
Previously on
I'm
Sippin' and Bitchin'.
especially since we were bulk recording episodes multiple times. Ooh, we could do that maybe. We'll workshop it. We'll workshop it.
If you don't hear the
9.9.
next time or previously on, it means that we got way in over our head and said no.
Correct. So when you're listening to this is October 9th. We'll have another episode tomorrow, October 10th. I'm going to try to pump out at least a couple episodes a week for the next few weeks, so that we're
Pump
done
it up.
by Thanksgiving. And by
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, I mean before Thanksgiving is the plan right now. Um,
Steph
but
and I will have some in-person content coming up soon.
yes, will
I'm
it be fully
excited.
book related? Probably not,
No.
but we'll post it on our socials anyway. So if you like the vloggy style, oh, we could do like a cute little vloggy style kind of video.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
we'll figure it out. We'll workshop it. We're workshopping a lot here. But sipping and
Way
bitching
in
on
over our heads.
everything, and go follow us, like, subscribe, share, save, all the
Great.
things.
All the things.
Great, all the things. And we will catch you later, bitches. Bye.
Bye.